Well, good morning, everybody. Beautiful Monday morning. Conference held this last weekend. A lot of good things listened to. Just a thought this morning. Maybe starting this out, I'd like to dedicate this session to the daughters of our oldest daughter, Carol Leslie, and dedicate this to Lindsay, Danny, granddaughters, thinking of you, thinking of all of you, but this is for you guys this morning. Well, last time we considered the voice, and hopefully that was of interest to you. Today we're going to go to the answers. This is what I'll call it when I place it upon YouTube. Several weeks after hearing the voice down in the boiler room down there, I was walking over in the Diamond Park. Diamond Park meaning the park in Oakland, California, close to where my Coast Guard ship is located in the estuary between Oakland and Alameda. Government Island was the exact location of where our ship was moored. And I was Sunday afternoon just over there, just not doing anything particularly, just enjoying a nice afternoon in the park. Must have been, well, I'm not sure what time it was, I don't recall. But walking through the park, and I hear some music coming from toward the south end of the park. It was unusual music. It was organ music. And so curious, might be a religious group down there, I decided to walk on over, and I walked to this building. It's kind of a nondescript building. It doesn't particularly look like a church building. But I peek in through the door, and sure enough, there's somebody playing an organ up there. There are pews along the side. And I decide to, looks like they're getting ready to start a meeting of some kind. That is, the organist is practicing what appears to be. And so I decide to go in and take a look. And there's a few people seated in there, and I sit down on one of the pews closest to where the door is so I can get out real quick if I need to. And I no sooner sit down than a lady who's sitting in the same aisle that I am, where the pew is, comes over toward me, and she says, "Hello there." And I respond to her. And then she asks a question which I have never heard asked to someone new in church in the last 60 years. She asks, "Why are you here?" Why am I here? And then I tell her I'm here because I'm looking for answers to some questions that I have. "Oh, what are your questions?" And then I tell her, is there a purpose in life? Did we live before we were born? Is there anything after death? Her eyes light up. She looks at me and says, "Hey, I'll get some pamphlets for you. Before you leave, make sure you get these from me." And so I sit there. The service starts. I don't recall much about the service. Doesn't seem too much difference than the other ones I've attended in the different churches in the Bay Area. But at the conclusion of the service, she comes over and she has 3 pamphlets, which she gives me. She says, "Here, Read these. I think they'll answer your question for you. Thank her for them. I leave the chapel, and the next day our ship leaves for the Gulf of Alaska. Now, the reason we go to the Gulf of Alaska is because we spend about 24, 25 days there sending weather reports back to the mainland of the United States. We just sit out in the middle of the Gulf. Of course, this is January, and so it's not only cold, the seas are extremely rough. And you'd have to appreciate what it's like out at sea there. Just to give you a quick idea, when we go to sea and get out there and park, in a sense, we don't anchor, we just sit out there facing into the wind to keep the ship straight. And the waves come rolling in over one after another, rolling in. And the ship goes like this. It goes from one side to the other side. And the worse the waves get, the more the ship inclines until it gets over, and then it just shakes and before it starts back over again. Well, when you get to that point, you don't know whether the ship is going to go all the way over or whether it's going to come back. So you hold your breath till it comes back around. And many of the sailors, in fact, most all of us, lose weight when we go out to sea and sit out there because it takes so much effort just to remain straight, remain upright as that is happening. And sleeping in your bed at night, in your bunk, you roll from one side to the other, and so you hold on. There's a metal rods down the side of each bunk. You hold on to those as you roll. And if you let loose, or you could roll right off the bunk and onto the deck or the floor. At any rate, that's kind of the reality of being aboard a Coast Guard cutter out in the Gulf of Alaska. But I get out there on this trip, and I have these 3 pamphlets, and so I began to read the first pamphlet, which is called The Plan of Salvation. And as I read that pamphlet, the truth of what's being told to me, what is written there, comes through with a force and a power that I have never experienced before. And as I understand that I am a child of God, that I am here on this earth temporarily to become a better person, and that I will return to my Father in heaven when this life is over, that fills me with so much joy that I had never before that moment experienced the happiness and the joy and the elation that I experienced at that moment in time. I don't understand what's happening except that for the first time in my life, I feel the Holy Ghost. That's what it's called. I come to learn later. The Holy Ghost, the Spirit of God. And it testifies to me, just overwhelms me that these things are true. Well, I read the other 2 pamphlets as well before our ship leaves to go back to this Oakland, to the Bay Area. And when I get back there, the first thing I do is go to the home of Sister Humphreys and meet with her and her family that's there. She has one son who has been in the Marine Corps, another son who's on a mission at that time, an older daughter, and a younger son. And she and her husband. And I asked her, I have written out for her about 20 questions, a whole list of questions that come to my mind as I read this. Who is the man who wrote this? Where does it come from? How do they happen to know this? And so I meet with her and I begin to learn about Joseph Smith. began to learn about the Book of Mormon. She answers a number of my questions, but for many of them, she said, look, I'll give you some other books. I'll loan you some books to read so that you can get more understanding of these. I can't answer all of the questions that you have. So here's some books. And she gives me Orson Pratt's works, Joseph Smith, The Teachings of the Prophet, Joseph Smith, Brigham Young's Discourses, The Great Apostasy, Orson Pratt, I believe. And so I take these back to the ship and begin studying these over the period of the next 20 days. And then our ship goes to sea again. And when we come back, I go to Sister Humphreys, that's her name, Sister Mavis Humphreys, Diamond Ward, Oakland, California. And I ask her, how do I get baptized? How do I get baptized? She says, well, I'll talk to the bishop and perhaps he can interview you. And so she does. Arrangements are made for me to meet with the bishop of the Diamond Ward. I go in and talk to him. His name is Bishop Elmo Smith. Bishop of the ward, later becomes stake president in the Berkeley area, Oakland area. And he asks me a lot of questions. And then at the end of the interview that we have, he says, I will baptize you, Brother Craig. I will baptize you. And so we make arrangements for the baptism to be held at the Oakland Tabernacle. And the night before I'm to be baptized by Bishop Smith, I take a trip over to San Francisco on the BART to attend a musical carousel, which is being held in the Opera House. But I get there a couple of hours early, so I'm walking through the streets of San Francisco, just interesting area. And as I'm walking down the street, I'm on the outside of a big sidewalk, and the buildings are on this side. And I'm walking down this side of the street, and I approach a place where I used to drink before. And as I'm going to walk by this building, it's as if something takes hold of my shoulders, turns me, and moves me right through the door, entryway, to this bar, is what it is, and down the counter, past to the very end, where it makes a turn at the end, and sits me down at the bar on a bar stool. A bartender, it's as if I'm in a daze. I can't explain it, except I have no volition. I have no will. It's just whatever this is has just sat me down on the bar stool. And the bartender comes up and says, what would you like? And I said, I'd like a beer. This next night I'm to be baptized. And I say, I'd like a beer. He says, would you like anything else? Yes, as long as I'm having a beer, I'll have a pack of cigarettes. And he turns around to go get those. And as he does, the thought occurs to me very clearly, and as long as you're having the cigarettes, you might as well go to hell. It was as if I woke out of it, that dazed state, whatever it was. Feel embarrassed, look around. I haven't touched. Meanwhile, the bartender has brought the cigarettes and the drink and has set them on the counter. I back away, turn around, get up, walk as if I'm going to make a phone call up by the telephone booth at the front of the bar, go in there momentarily, and then out through the door. I have felt the power of Satan arrayed against me, no question.